Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. In today's video we're going to be talking about a video request that I received a few months ago, and it's about the application named Deleterr, and this application is hosted in GitHub, so you can find it in rfs/Deleterr. And this application basically is a way for us to remove content that is old, that we have not used, we have not consumed in a while. So it connects to radar, sonar, and totally to identify and delete media files based on a specified criteria. I want to make an important note here and clarify that this application, I tried to set it up and it did not work. So if you're expecting this video to show you how to get the application to work, I cannot promise you that, because I followed the instructions in the website and the configuration guide written by this developer, and it just simply didn't work for me. I don't know if there's any problem with the latest version that is being published in Docker Hub, or there's something that is missing in the documentation where it somehow had errors in the way that I configured the application. But to me, it looked like it was a problem that was internal to the application and not a configuration error, because it was making a reference to files that we didn't touch that were part of the application. So I just want to make that big note in the beginning, so that if you continue watching, you know that what I'm doing here is going through the exercise of attempting to install this as a normal person would, and hopefully having the developer look at what issues this causes and ways for him to improve the application. So I'm going to make a note on the very end on my point of view regarding the issues that I found and how I think it could be improved. But for now, just know that in this video, I couldn't get it to work following the instructions provided by the developer. So you can customize that criteria, and it allows you to set up rules for different libraries so that it decides what to remove and what not to remove. This is good if you have very small space, so if you don't have enough storage to hold your media. So in this case, you can schedule Deleterr to run on a schedule, and it'll automatically delete files that meet that criteria that you specify. So it allows you to keep your library clean and fresh, so getting rid of the old stuff without having to worry about managing the space in your instance. And in this case, I'm going to be very careful with this. I'm not going to use this app for myself in the real world, so this is just going to be done carefully in my lab to make sure that I don't lose anything there. So if you don't see any content, that's why, because basically this deletes stuff. So I have my NAS set up in a way that if something is deleted, it's gone forever. So I don't want that to happen to my content. So I'm going to use that lab, and basically we're going to set it up in a Synology NAS with 7.2, so using the Docker Compose, and gracefully from them we already have a Docker Compose example here that we can use to set this up, and they give us the link to the Docker location in Docker Hub and about a configuration file and what the settings are that we can put in there. So we're going to follow that, and we're going to create that instance of Deleterr because we've already fulfilled the prerequisite, which is having totally running, and we already have sonar and radar, so that's perfect for us. So let's get to that. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy their sample Docker Compose file, and then I'm going to go into my NAS, and I'm going to create a new project for this, and let's call this Deleterr, and we need a path for this, so I have not created that. So let's go here into the folder, go into projects, and then create a folder for Deleterr, and let's also create a config location for that application, so Deleterr. So now we have those in there. So here we'll look for that Docker project Deleterr. We select that as the location of that, and then we say we're going to create our Docker Compose, and I'm going to paste the contents here, and then we're going to start working on this. I'm not going to use the Google repository, so I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to leave it as rfs/Deleterr, which is the Docker Hub one, and that's fine for us. Then the name of this container is going to be Deleterr, and here you can specify the environment variable that says the log level for this application. I'm going to leave it as default with info. And in here, they're specifying two different folders that they're going to be mapped, one for the config and one for the logs, but they're all inside the config in the container, so I'm just going to leave it like that in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this with the actual location in our system of that config that we created. So we go here and we say properties, and we copy this path, and that path is what we're going to be using here to replace this. So our NAS is volume1 docker configs deleter, and then inside the container is /config. Then on the restart, we can leave that if you want as no, or you can just completely just remove this. And then for the scheduler, it's another application that it uses to schedule the runs of Deleterr. So it's from the M Quadros Ophelia image, and that's the latest version that they're using. And then let's say I'm going to name this Ophelia, and then depends on Deleterr, so it has to create Deleterr first, and then it creates the Ophelia one, and then the command is going to be the daemon docker, and it connects to the docker socket, and then it restarts unless stopped. Let's use this also for this one. And then it says that the job is defined to run every week, and the container that is going to be run is Deleterr. So basically this tells us that the Deleterr container basically is like a job. It's not a container that is constantly running. It's just a container that gets executed, and then once it is finished executing, then it just stops, and that's it. And then on the schedule that we specify here, it triggers the container Deleterr to do its thing. So that's how we create this. So let's say next. I'm not going to start it for now. I'm just going to create it, and then we're going to look into the details of this application to see how we configure it. Now, if we go back to the GitHub repository, we'll have a link here for the configuration guide, because it tells us that to configure this application, we need to create a YAML file, and it has to be settings.yaml. So that's the name that we have to specify for that file. And if we click here where it says configuration guide, it's going to take us to this document here that has the configuration guide on how we create that configuration file. It basically tells us that we need to put the file in the config directory, and then we need to set up the specific things that are necessary in here. So we can go ahead and create that settings.yaml file in the NAS. So here I am in the virtual NAS. I'm going to go into docker configs, and then Deleterr, and here we're going to create a new file that is going to be settings.yaml. Let's remove the txt, and yes, we have that file there. And now we're going to have to make changes to this file, so I'm going to open this with Notepad, and in Notepad then we're going to be putting the changes that we make to this. So let's go back into the configuration information, and it says that we have several things here. In my case, I'm definitely going to be using this option that says dry run, because it says if you specify dry run as true, then it's going to not do the actions. It's just going to log it like if it were going to do it. But in your case, then you have to say false if you wanted to actually do that. And then here we have an option that says Plex library scan after actions. So that tells it to scan, like to trigger a scan of the library after it has completed performing its actions, so that anything that was removed is removed from your Plex library. So you can set that to true. And then you can also say the same thing to totally, because totally keeps track of your media, and that's what it uses to identify what to remove. So it's better for it to rescan again. And then if you would want to put a delay between the actions, and you can put that in there. I'm just going to leave it at the default, which is 0. Then here's an example of how you set that up. Oh, this is a YAML file. I'm sorry, I was not putting this the right way. So let's make sure that we follow that. So there we go. We have those values there. Then let's see what else we can do. For Plex, we have to specify the details about our Plex instance, so we can just copy this here, and then we can put that again. So let's say in my case it's going to be the IP of the NAS, and then the port is 32400. That's correct. And then the token for Plex you have to find out in your Plex instance. Alright, turns out that if you go into Plex, you cannot find that token directly in your server, like if it were an API key, which is another annoyance from this type of application. If you need to get that token, you have to go into the Plex website to get the instructions, but it basically tells you that you have to sign into your Plex account, and then you have to browse a library item and then view the XML file for it, and then in the URL you'll see that plain token in plain text on the URL bar, and you can copy it from there. In my case, I'm just going to put the random value because I'm not going to be using this, but that's how you get it if you need it. In our file, we would be putting the Plex token. I'm just going to leave it as your Plex token. So this is not going to work in this video because it's not going to be able to connect. And then for radar, you have to do the same thing. You have to create a block of configuration for radar, and in that block you're going to put all the information that you need here. So you need the name, you need the URL, you need the API key, and then if you have another instance of radar for 4K, for example, you do the same thing. For any instance of radar that you want to connect, you have to put those values. So I'm going to put 1, and then in here, it would normally be the IP of the NAS, and then the port for radar, I think we chose 8082, and then you would put your API key here. And we have to do the same, no, radar is 8083, I believe. And then you have to do the same for sonar, which is the TV and anime, so you would do the same, but it would be port 8082 based on our series. That's an example right there. So the same, and then your totally, you have to do the same. You have to create an entry for the totally servers. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new block here. We're going to name this totally, and then there would be 8075 if I remember correctly, and then the key for that. And if you use track T, you would do the same for track T. I'm not using it, so that's more than enough. And then here's the configuration things that we have to put in here in the file. For each of your libraries, you need to specify how you want Deleterr to behave. So you have to define the name of the library, which instance to use, the action mode, and various thresholds related to the watch status and addition date of the media. And you can set several rules. And it gives you all the different properties that you have to configure. The name is the name of the Plex library that you want to manage, so you have to be exactly like you named it in Plex. And then radar is the identifier of the radar instance that we're going to be using, so that's the name of the radar instance that we configured. Sonar is the same as the identifier of the sonar instance. And then series type here is where you specify how to filter for the show type. For example, if it's just an anime or if it's TV show. So if it's TV, standard. If it's anime, you put anime. The action mode here is what you want to perform on those items that it identifies as targets, and that's delete. So it deletes that, which is the time in days that the media will not be actionable. So if it's older than that value, so more than that amount of days, then it deletes that. And then you can specify a list that can be excluded, so it's not deleted if you specify that. And then the watch status, so that any media that is not in that state will not be acted upon. And then there's other values like apply last watch threshold to collection, that if you set that to true, all the items in that collection will receive the same status as the last watched. And there's the added at threshold, which is another option that says that the media that was added to Plex within this period will not be actionable. So that's the threshold of days that will not be touched. We have the disk size threshold. That'll delete only when you don't have enough space, and you define that space in here. And how many actions you want it to perform every time it runs, and then you put a number there. You can sort the media with this option, and you specify what kind of value you want to sort it by, and the order in which you want to sort, if it's ascending or descending. So this gives you an example of what that configuration would be. So we would put that in here at the bottom of our file. Alright, so it would look like this, where we're saying, you know, for the movies, which is the library of movies in Plex, we're gonna connect to radar, which is the instance of radar, and we're gonna say that we're gonna delete, and then we're gonna have the threshold of that value that you want to specify for last watched. So anything that has not been watched in more than 90 days, then it's a possibility to delete. And then here's the limit of if they were added before 180 days ago, that's going to be put into the target also. And then here it's applying the last watch threshold to the full collection, and then it says they can execute 3,000 actions at the same time, and then it's going to sort everything ascending based by the title. So that's how that's configured. This would be what tells Deleterr how to behave. Here's where we would specify exclusions. So if there's something that you want to make sure that it's not deleted, then you can put the exclude block with all the things that you want to prevent from being blocked. So for example, if you have, in this case, a movie named Forrest Gump, then that's going to be not deleted. If you have a collection that is called Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's not going to be deleted. Or any movies by Tom Cruise, for example, or Brad Pitt are not going to be deleted. Or there's a bunch of options here. You can see that. I'm not going to cover this. You can always come back here into the documentation and read it and then make the changes yourself. That's how you would prevent it from deleting things that you don't want to delete. That's all the configuration that you have to put for it to actually build that container and then run to delete all the old things that you have in your media. And so that in this case, we would just go here into Deleterr, and then we'd say build it, and then like usual, okay, I capitalized that, and that should not have been capitalized. So let's make sure that we fix that. The depends on, that is on YAML configuration. So this should be Deleterr lowercase, and now it's working properly. It's pulling the image, well, the images, because it has to pull the scheduler and it also has to pull the Deleterr image. So let's wait until it does the pulling and it tries to build that container, and we see what it does. Once again, this type of applications, I honestly believe that the developers are shooting themselves in the foot when they force people to go and figure out how to create a configuration file, especially with an application like Plex that you don't really have an API key, and it's annoying to try to get that token from it. And they should just build a user interface, in my opinion, for their applications to make it easier, because they're targeting the wrong people. In this case, again, the people that are using these type of applications, they're not technical. They don't want to go through this process. You need to give them a user interface. All right, it's creating the Deleterr container, and now it's also creating the Ophelia scheduler container, and they're starting. All right, and it has finished. We got the exit 0 code, and we got the notification here that it was able to build it this time. Previously, I had a capitalized Deleterr here, and that caused the problems. If you did that, make sure to make it lowercase. And then now we're going to see what happened here. So we have the Ophelia container. We're going to go into the logs, and it says that it's starting a scheduler with one job, and it registered a Deleterr job that is going to be executed weekly. So that's pretty straightforward. It's a scheduling container, so it's just going to run that container on a schedule. And then when we go into the Deleterr application and we go into the logs, let's see what we see in this case. We're going to see a lot of errors probably because it cannot connect to the instances. That's okay. So in this case, it has 23 items. Let's see. Let's refresh this a little bit. All right, it's the log files, etc., are not in the folder, so that's why it's complaining about the files not in there and the directory not being there. It should have created it itself. I don't know why it is complaining instead of creating it. Again, the application needs working. Yeah, if I go into the config directory, I see that it has not attempted to create the folders, so that lets me know that the developer really needs to work on this application, because something as basic as that is not even working. So the application should check if it has the config logs directory, and if it's not there, then it should just create it and not complain about it not existing. So let's try to see if we can fix this problem by creating that. I'm going to refresh it one last time to see if it does anything, but it's not looking good so far. All right, it has not done anything. So I guess we're going to have to do and create a logs folder in here. And inside that, we're going to have to create a Deleterr log file, which is what it's expecting to see. So that we have configs, logs, Deleterr. Let's see if it complains about anything else. And no, it looks like that's the only thing that it was complaining about. So let's try again to see if it decides to work. Let's refresh just in case to see if we see any new entries in here. All right, now the entries change. So it says that it's running the version 0019. And the level for the login is set to info, and it says that it failed to connect to Radar, and that makes sense because I didn't provide the API. So it says the configuration is invalid and it's exiting. So what I'm assuming is that in this case it would just connect and then pull information from that instance. So let's try to see if I can connect at least Sonar and Radar and totally to it, and see if that does anything to improve our case, even if I don't have the Plex token that it's asking for. So let's go and turn on those containers, and then let's try to get those keys from those to configure it in here. So we have Radar starting, Sonar starting. So we have those three that are going to be starting now. Hopefully it doesn't break because I did it too fast, and you usually have to give it time between actions or the Synology interface kind of breaks. Let's be positive here. All right, so let's go into Sonar real quickly. Let's go into settings and go to general option. And in here, we should see the API key. So let's grab that API key and put it into this file here for Sonar. I need to change this. So this is Sonar. There we go. And that's the proper port. And then here goes the API key. And then let's do the same for Radar. So in Radar, we go into settings, we go into general, we copy this API key, and then we put it into this file here. And now we got that. And then for totally, let's see if we can do that too. All right, so here it is. We go into the settings, which is here where it says web interface, and then the API key, we can see it here, and then we can copy this, and then we can go back into the file and put that for totally and save those changes. So now the only thing that we don't have is the Plex token. Let's see how far it goes now. So let's go back into the NAS. Let's go back into the Deleterr container, and we probably have to restart this. Let's see what the logs say. Oh, it actually restarted again. So let's see what happens here in the logs as it tries to work again in connecting to the instances that we have specified. Alright, this application is complaining about things that are outside of our ability to change, because it's talking about a Python script in the application that is giving us errors, and those are things that we just cannot deal with. And it's basically saying that it cannot connect to the totally URL that we specified. I'm assuming that that application is somehow parsing that file that we created, and it says there's a problem in our configuration, but that configuration is actually correct. The only thing that is not correct is the Plex, because it doesn't have the token. I guess this is going to be a failure on this application. Honestly, I was not planning to use it anyway, but if you are interested in using this application, you're going to have a hard time trying to get this application running, as I can see here. I posted this video as it is because I honestly think that it's important for people to see why some applications are actually not a good idea, especially when you make it so difficult to configure the application. And again, unnecessarily complicated to set up this application with a settings file, and for something that honestly just runs once a week. I don't even see the point of having an application for this. In theory, it should have worked because we're following the instructions that are given here. The only thing that it should have complained about is the Plex connection, because we don't have that API key. But as you can see, it's complaining about other things, so the developer has to work on this application because it's not working properly. That's gonna be it for this one. Sometimes things don't work, and I'm here to show you why you should or should not use that. In my opinion, this is one of those applications that are not worth the effort. It's too complicated to set up for anyone, and even someone like me that knows how to do these things, it just doesn't work. So let's summarize the issues that I've found so far that are crucial for this application. Number one is that you should not rely on a third-party container, in this case Ophelia, to run your application. The developer of this application should make the application stay running and run its jobs on a schedule, like other applications do, like Sonar, Radar, etc. All of those applications stay running, they have a user interface, and they have jobs that are executed on a schedule. Additionally, the application should check whether the required files and folders exist, and if they don't, then it creates them instead of exiting when you run it. Like we saw in this case, if we didn't have the logs directory or the log file in there, instead of creating it, which is simple, it just exited. That's just wrong. It's a basic practice in all applications. And then the third thing that I found that was important is that you should not use a configuration YAML file to set it up, especially if it's complicated. You should provide a user interface for that, for your users. That should definitely improve the process of getting the application going, because at this point I don't know if there's a problem in the configuration because I followed what was written in the documentation to set this up, or if it was something else. So definitely put a user interface for that. It's unnecessary to have to go through YAML files or configuration files for this, especially when you have to look for a bunch of different options and figure out what you need to set up or not. And I would say those are the main things. Unfortunately, the Tide brought us an application that is not working. So I'm sorry, the person that requested this video, I cannot get you a guide into setting this up properly. And this application seems to be like very in its infancy because it's version 0019. So that's like hot fixes. It's not even a minor version released yet. So this application should not be considered as ready to use, in my opinion, based on its versioning and what we just saw. So that's gonna be it. I'm sorry, but I have to be honest, and hopefully the developer of this application looks at this video and takes on those tips that I'm giving him to improve the application, because it could be useful if it's properly implemented. So I'll leave you there. This is going to be it. Remember, if you like the content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so, and comment in the comment section below and let me know things that you would like to see featured in the channel. Remember also, I'm not monetizing this channel, so on my part, you should not see any YouTube ads on my videos. I rely entirely on your support, so feel free to donate with the link in the description below or using Bitcoin. I'm going to see you in the next one. Take care.